for tuning into The Blend. My name is Steve Benz. We are broadcasting live, yes, live in downtown Chicago. Today's guest, he is a rock and roll Hall of Famer. You're going to recognize his guitar no matter where you go. You're going to recognize his song. You're going to recognize his past work. He's got a brand new album. His name is Don Felder. Let's welcome him to The Blend.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm sorry I'm a couple of minutes late.
That's allowed when you're a rock and roll Hall of Famer.
I get a little slack, huh?
Just a little bit. Hey, I know you're pressed for time, so let's jump right into this.
Sure.
You got your latest release, American Rock and Roll. It is pure American rock and roll. Can I just say that? Can you turn it up to 11 in your little Beamer? Is that where it belongs?
Absolutely. If you've got a 12, you should actually go to 12. That's the whole idea, is to just kind of shake, rattle, and roll and rock and roll through this record. I had a lot of fun making it, writing it, recording it, producing it. Invited a whole lot of friends to come sit in with me on this record, and we just had a rock and roll party in my studio and invited my friends.
So let's just talk about who's on this album. You've got Sammy Hagar, What, Slash, Come On, Richie Sambora, Peter Frampton, who I love, Joe Satriani. The list goes on and on and on. Do you just pick up the phone and call these guys?
Yeah, pretty much. I've done a lot of charity work with these guys. I've known Sammy Hagar since the 80s. I did his TV show a couple of years ago. We've done charity work together. Slash and I have done some charity stuff together. Peter Frampton and I toured for about 14 or 15 shows with Peter Frampton's Guitar Circus. Alex Lyson from Rush is on this record with me. He and I have played golf together for St. Jude's Children's Hospital and jammed at their fundraiser a couple of times. Sambora I've known for a long time. As a matter of fact, I went over to Sambora's studio to record his guitar parts there, and we're about halfway through overdubbing himself and myself on this basic track. I turn around and look, and walking down the staircase is Orianthi. Now, I've known Orianthi since she first came to the U.S. I think she was about 19 or something at the time, and was absolutely astounded by her playing and singing. I've done some charity work with her when she was in Alice Cooper's band. She'd come out and play Hotel California with me. She was going to be in the Michael Jackson This Is It tour before Michael Jackson sadly passed away.
Wow.
So she comes walking down the staircase, and I'd completely forgotten that Richie and Orianthi were a couple at this time. So I said, Orianthi, go grab a guitar. You got to play on this record with me. So it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. She's got on a pair of cut-off shorts, and a T-shirt, a baseball hat, flip-flops, just got out of bed. She grabs this guitar and just absolutely destroys it. Probably my favorite solo on the record is Orianthi playing this song called Limelight together with me and Richie Sambora. Just fantastic. Mick Fleetwood and I have played golf together. I've known him since the 70s when the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac were touring together. And so for the title track of American Rock and Roll, it's a bit of like a rockumentary that starts back in 1969 at Woodstock and kind of progresses through the decades of all the people that went on after Woodstock and being so heavily influenced by those musicians like Hendrix and Santana and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead, all those people that went on to have sterling careers through the decades themselves. So I got Mick to play the first half of that title track, American Rock and Roll. It starts with Mick playing by himself. And it really sets that early 70s sound, tone, and feel. And then about halfway through, Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers comes in like a gorilla on steroids. He plays so strong and so aggressively. The whole track just shifts gears, as it did in the 80s and 90s with all the big hair bands and Guns N' Roses and the Chili Peppers and Foo Fighters later. And so musically, it kind of takes a migration or a growth from early 70s through to today. And a lot of that subtlety that takes place musically, you don't really notice. But I wanted to write a verse about Guns N' Roses, mention them in, I think it's the third verse, Slash and Rose. And then I said, Slash lives pretty close to me. Maybe I can get him to come in and just play a few licks on that verse where he's mentioned in.
Okay.
And so he came in with his guitar, and we sat down, and he said, well, where do you want me to play? I said, well, anywhere you want. So he said, well, start at the top, and I'll just play all the way through the record. Right. And he did. He did an amazing performance. We did it like 2 or 3 times, going from the top to the bottom, and then we were able to go in and edit and move some things and make some room for me to be able to play on top of him and with him and trading back and forth and the solos and stuff. So a lot of these people I've known. Todd Zuckerman, the drummer from Styx, plays on it. We've been trying to figure out how I could get him on a record for years now. Steve Gadd, who I made many records with back in the 80s, came in and played on a song called Sun for me. Jim Keltner, probably one of the most famous, legendary rock drummers in history, who's played with everybody from George Harrison to Eric Clapton and Steve Miller and on and on and on, came in and played on a couple of tracks really early on. Just a lot of people that I knew and relied on to work on this record musically. And then finally I got down to where I was really kind of getting very close to the end, and I needed a great mixing engineer. So we contacted Bob Clearmountain, who's probably the most Grammy-awarded hi-fi audio engineer that's ever existed. He's made records, mixed them for the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Bruce Springsteen, Peter Gabriel, Bon Jovi, Dire Straits, on and on and on. He's just got an amazing history and pedigree. He wound up mixing it for me. And a guy named Bernie Grunman, which is a story because he's probably the leading mastering engineer in the business today. He's done Steely Dan and Prince and Michael Jackson's Thriller record, everybody. He leans over and whispers to one of his assistants to do something. So the assistant runs out of the studio and again, and he's got this 2-track tape that looks really familiar, and he hands it to me. It turns out to be the original 2-track mixed master of Hotel California from 1976. Bernie had not only mastered it then to vinyl, but then he had done all the mastered remixes for CD, remixes for remastering for vinyl, and so I've got a picture of myself holding this original 1976 2-track tape that we had made, 40 years ago or something. And it was just, probably 2 of the best people in the business, Bob Clearmountain and Bernie Grunman. And the artwork that's on the front of this record is by a guy named Bernie Taupin, who is the lyricist and co-wrote every Elton John song I think that Elton has ever recorded. So everybody on this record is part of the history of American rock and roll. So I thought it was just fitting to have all these people involved in it as well. It was an honor, too, to have them all step up and help me out with it.
Now, when you did the construction of this song, did you have people in mind to play on it, or did you just sit down and it just kind of poured out?
I wrote the songs first and then tried to cast the appropriate people musically into the appropriate song. Like Slash would not be appropriate to play on one of the ballads, like The Way Things Have to Be.
True.
He's really just his fabulous technique and his hard-edged guitar part, what he's most known for, really fits songs like American Rock and Roll. Sambora played on the shuffle with Orianthi, and I kept going, who can I get to play on this shuffle? Who's got that kind of grease? And I kept thinking of Richie. Didn't even think of Orianthi until she came walking down the staircase. So I went out to Richie's house. He did an amazing job. Now, I knew Alex Lifeson from Rush was walking around doing nothing but playing golf and kind of twiddling his thumbs, waiting for the opportunity to jump on something. So I contacted Alex for this song that I felt was really appropriate for his style and his playing and the content of the lyrics. So he was like, yes, well, what do I do? Where do I come? What do I do? So he was in Canada at the time, and I sent him some stems. He recorded on it in his studio, and then sent it back to me. And with just a little bit of editing and moving around a few licks so I could make room for myself, he did a amazing job of arranging acoustic guitars in the bridge there and playing incredible solo on the end with me. And so it was really casting the right person for the right job. And it turned out that I had this incredibly large palette of talent to choose from. And everyone that I reached out to said, absolutely, what do you want me to do? Where do I go? David Page from Toto. Yep. And I co-wrote the only co-written song on the record. And it turns out that he played piano. I wrote this one song called The Way Things Have to Be, which is kind of a ballad that I wrote on piano. It's probably the only song I've ever written on piano, to tell you the truth. But my piano chops aren't great. So I asked David if he would do me the favor of playing the piano part, which he did beautifully and embellished it and made it sound gorgeous. Steve Porcaro did a bunch of additional supplemental keyboard synthesizer things for me. Nathan East played bass on it. Chris Chaney from Jane's Addiction. Abe Laboriel, since I've known since 1970, played bass on Little Latin Lover. Just a ton of people worked on this record that I knew and had worked with before and were friends with. So, like I said, I had a rock and roll party in my studio and invited a lot of my friends to come play with it.
Wow. What a story, and what a group of musicians. So this makes me ask, you have this album, and then your last one in 2012, Road for Forever?
Yeah, that's right.
So with the switch, where now you have a group of musicians, where are you as a songwriter? What was your growth curve from your last CD and this one?
Well, that last CD, Road to Forever, should have been entitled Road to Took Forever, because it took a long time in the writing and recording and production. And even between 2012 and the year that this release was finished, which was, I think I finished it in the fall of 2018, it's difficult for me, as much as I tour, to have the time off the road, at home, in my studio, to write and record. If I get somewhere between 3 and 7 days a month where I'm off the road in my studio, where I can actually take the time to go in, turn it on with an engineer, and start writing and working, I'm delighted to have a week out of a month to do that. And it's usually 3 days here and 2 or 3 days there, or 1 day there. And so it just takes a long time to write and record so many different song ideas. And I think for this record, I did almost 20 different songs. I finished 13. There's 11 of them on this CD at the moment. We may release a couple of the others as bonus tracks somewhere. But it just takes time to do it. And I won't put out anything that I don't really think is great, that I have worked on. If I'm not excited about it, I can't expect other people to be excited about it too. So if I do something and it's kind of a C+ kind of song finished, it goes away to digital heaven. In other words, I hit the erase head, goodbye, it's just gone. So it's not stuck in some archive somewhere that somebody can release it later. It's just not good enough. It's gone. So it takes time for me on my busy touring schedule to have the time to write and record and produce. And not only that, but to coordinate all these other artists' touring schedules as well, for them to be able to have the time to either come into my studio or me go to their studio or send them stems and record and send it back. That's just a massive amount of coordination to be able to do. But the thrill of it all was back on the Road to It Took Forever CD, I played everything on the record myself, every guitar part, all the electric guitars, slide guitars, acoustic guitars, nylon string guitars. I played dulcimer and zither and anything that had strings on, except for one track. I had Steve Lukather come in and play on the title track, Road to Forever, with me. But this time, I wanted to have that kind of instant spontaneity and that thrill of creating on the spot with somebody else, whether it was drummers or whether it was bass players or guitar players, where Frampton and I sit and play together, or Sambora and I sit and play together, or me and Joe Satriani write these incredible guitar solos for a song called Rock You that Sammy Hagar sang a duet with me on. It was just fun and exciting to be able to sit across from these people and just make stuff up and have it turn out so well and so exciting. So I really enjoyed this process. I'll probably do more of the same, whether it's the whole record featuring guest artists on every song or not. It's just a really fun, exciting way as an artist and producer to be able to make records that bring you a lot of excitement and joy.
Now, with knowing all this, what's the most difficult part about being the front man? I mean, you're part of one of the greatest bands of all time. You know, people would put that in that top 5 category, whatever. So where do you think your legacy is, you know, as a guitarist and as a front man?
That's a great question. You know, I think a lot of the work that I did with the Eagles has, you know, become globally recognized. Sure. I mean, the fact that white double neck that I put together to tour with the Hotel California album in 1976 has been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since 1998.
Okay.
It is now hanging in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York in this exhibit called Play It Loud, which is basically the history of the most influential guitars in the history of rock and roll. Jimi Hendrix's white Stratocaster from Woodstock is there. The Everly Brothers guitar is there. Van Halen's guitar is there. Jimmy Page's guitar is hanging in there. Everybody that you can name that has risen, you know, to the top of the rock and roll world is on display there. And to be honored by taking my guitar out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and exhibiting it there in that museum probably says something about that particular song and my work with the Eagles, not only being audio-wise known worldwide, but that particular guitar being so identified with me and that song and that work. As a matter of fact, when I played a song at the Beacon Theater, a show at the Beacon Theater with Steve Miller about 4 years ago, and at the very end of my show, I always play Hotel California.
Sure.
My guitar tech comes walking out on stage carrying that white double neck guitar. The audience is already up on their feet and been partying and dancing for the last 5 or 6 songs. When they see that guitar, they go, yeah! This huge roar comes out of the crowd because they know what's coming. Not from the artist, not from the song, but they recognize that guitar. The curator for the Museum of Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, was sitting in the audience and saw that happen, had a moment of an epiphany where he realized that the instrument has a connection with the audience and with the song, not just the artist. There was a whole different level of connection. He called up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a week later and said, I think we should try to do an exhibit of all the really identifiable, legendary rock guitars and put it in a Met. So they worked on it for, I think, 2.5, 3 years and finally put this thing together, and it opened, I think, April 5th or something. And I went back and played in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for CBS Sunday Morning. And then I played in front of 200 plus I guess photographers, press people, people from Rolling Stone magazine, New York Times, video cameras that would send stuff around the world. And sitting right in front of me, literally about 4 feet from my feet, was Jimmy Page.
Wow.
Now, I had never met Jimmy until that day, and I had never played live in front of him. Now, I've played in front of the press, on television, in front of hundreds of thousands of people at live concerts, but I have never been more intimidated to have to stand on a little stage, play by myself with no band, Hotel California, sing the last verse, and play those solos on the way out in front of Jimmy Page. And I was just praying that I wouldn't mess up and hit a clam or a bad note. And obviously he and everybody else in the world with that much press there would see it and know about it. But really, I was more intimidated by Jimmy than anything else that was in the room. So it was a real honor. So to answer your question, I would think that probably my work on Hotel
Okay.
California, the writing all the music and putting together the musical things that you hear on the record.
Sure.
A lot of it, the solos on the end with Walsh and I playing together. Just putting all that together is probably the kind of highlight worldwide of what people would recognize and associate with me as far as my legacy.
But now you've got a new CD out, Don. It's American Rock and Roll, just released. You are still on tour. Don, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. I need to have you back over and over again.
I would be delighted to come back and chat with you anytime. You just say when and where, and I'll be there.
And we'll have you play. How about that? We'll have you play, too.
Hey, okay. That sounds fantastic.
Don, thank you so much for joining The Blend.
You got it. Thanks a bunch. Talk to you later.
Thanks for calling in, Don.